Welcome to Kiz's Kitchen. Today we're going to be making Lucky Charms macarons. So macarons are this exquisite little almond cookie filled with some sort of cream filling, like sandwich style, and they are often associated with Paris in France, but they actually originated in Italy. So they were brought over by Catherine de Medici in like the 18th century or something, for a good reason, because they're delicious. So macarons do have a reputation for being a notoriously tricky thing to make, but I think that as long as you follow the directions very precisely and you're super careful, they're actually not that hard and they can turn out really successful. It might take a few tries, but they're really not the worst. So for this recipe, what you're going to need is 100 grams of egg whites, so that's about 3 eggs, but it's best to measure the egg whites. Then you need 140 grams of almond flour. And that's another thing, it's best to use a weighing scale for this recipe because cups measurements tend to not be as accurate, and you really have to be accurate for this recipe. 130 grams of powdered sugar and 90 grams of granulated sugar and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Then for your Lucky Charms buttercream, what you're going to need are 75 grams of Lucky Charms, 400 grams of whole milk, 110 grams of sugar, normal granulated sugar, 12 grams of cornstarch, which is I believe 1.5 teaspoons, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 egg and 1 egg yolk. So you can definitely use the egg yolk that you split from like these egg whites before. So let's get started. We're gonna begin with the cookie. So the first thing you're gonna want to do is blend these two ingredients, the almond flour and the powdered sugar. After that, you're going to sift them into a bowl. Now, when you're doing this, you'll be left with lots of these like big, chunky sort of looking parts of the almond flour and powdered sugar mixed up. And so these kind of big ones, you can just break up with your hands, or you can use a little spoon. So then you'll end up with these little chunks that first time you go through. You can just throw those away. The recipe accounts for that amount. And just go ahead and sift it a second time. Should be easier the second time through. Alright, now that we're all done sifting, the next thing we're going to do is whip our egg whites to the meringue. So before we do that, I'm actually going to clean this bowl down a little bit with some vinegar. You can use anything acidic like lemon juice, vinegar works too. And basically you're just trying to get rid of any excess oil or fat that might be in the pan that would prevent the meringue from whipping. You want to take a lot of precautions and just make sure that it doesn't go wrong. Alright, now that we have this kind of cloudy consistency, I'm going to go ahead and add the vanilla. And I'm going to add my food coloring. And make sure you're using gel food coloring. The liquidy kind can mess up with the texture. I'm just going to add a few drops there. Let it mix up until we get to our stiff peaks. So I would characterize this as soft peaks. This is getting there, but not quite stiff peaks yet. So you want to make sure it's more whipped than this. You can kind of tell because it's kind of falling out of the whisk here. If it's stiff peaks, it's going to be kind of stuck in there. All right, at this point, I have pretty much reached stiff peaks. So we're all done with the electric mixer. All right, now that you've got these stiff looking peaks, we're going to do one little last final step when it comes to whipping them. We're just going to go ahead and whip them by hand, just because we want to get the feel and make sure that they really are stiff peaks here. These feel like stiff peaks to me, but the test is, can you hold them upside down without anything falling out? That's how you know that they're stiff peaks. So I don't feel quite comfortable doing that yet, so I'm going to whisk it a little more. Right. Looks good to me. All right, now what we're gonna do is fold in 1/3 of our almond and powdered sugar mixture. And so the way you're folding it, you wanna basically just sweep around and then press down. You don't wanna be super aggressive with this. You just basically wanna mix until incorporated. Don't overdo it. And the reason you kind of do this movement is actually so that you get rid of the air bubbles. Because we did whip up those eggs, but we want to get rid of a little bit of the air that we have in them, so that way we can get that really like lava-like consistency in the macaron. All right, so I folded in 1/3 of my almonds. I'm gonna just go ahead and add the rest in. And we're gonna continue folding in that same fashion. Just scooping and pressing down like so. And some recipes give you like an exact number of times to mix. I find for me, I just like to go until I'm at the right consistency. And as you can see, it's kind of starting to get there now. It's starting to get a lot drippier. And the goal is basically for the ribbons to come out. You should be able to get it in like a figure 8 as it drips. So we're still not quite there yet, but definitely getting close. All right, so our batter is nice and ribbony, and we're gonna go ahead and transfer it to a piping bag. So I actually don't have a piping bag for some bizarre reason, so I'm gonna be using a Ziploc bag to just pipe it. So just keep in mind, you might not wanna use all of the batter at once, but sometimes it's easier to maneuver when you don't have too much batter. Plus that can help prevent you from over piping. So you wanna use some sort of circular tip. You're gonna pipe perpendicular to the tray about 3/4 of the way, and you wanna swirl up on that top. All right, once you've piped your macarons, you just wanna give them a smack on the counter to get rid of any air bubbles. And if you find that you still have like little air bubbles, you can grab a toothpick and just kind of pop those. So we're just gonna let these vibe out for a little bit after you've popped all those bubbles, and just give them about 40 to 60 minutes to develop a skin. Okay, so you can go ahead and preheat your oven to 300 degrees, and what might help your macarons bake better is putting an extra sheet in the oven while it's preheating, so that way they, when you put them in, they bake evenly throughout. Okay, so while we're letting the macarons vibe out and develop that skin, now's the perfect time to finish making that German buttercream. So I say finish making because you actually need to start with the pastry cream, which I already made and is in the fridge. So to make the pastry cream, which is Lucky Charms infused, I'm gonna hand it back to me from the past and we'll go from there.
Okay, here I am weighing out my 70 grams of Lucky Charms and my 400 grams of whole milk. I then let it infuse for an hour. After it's infused for an hour, you're going to want to strain out that liquidy mixture. You then strain it out a second time. After that, in a separate bowl, you're going to want to add in your sugar, cornstarch, egg and egg yolk, and salt. You're then going to whisk that all up thoroughly. And then you can set it aside. In a medium saucepan, add in your Lucky Charms infused buttermilk and your vanilla. Bring it to just below a simmer. Then temper it into the egg mixture. So what tempering is adding a small amount of the warm liquid to the big egg mixture at a time, so that way you can slowly increase the temperature to prevent scrambling your eggs. Yay, food science. Once you've tempered the mixture, you can add it all back into the saucepan and whisk it up a little bit. Then leave it on medium-high heat and whisk it thoroughly while it starts to thicken. Continue to whisk, and once it is thickened, let it sit for a minute on heat. Then take it off the heat, whisk it up, and transfer to a bowl immediately. Then you can pop it into the fridge where it needs to chill out for 4 to 24 hours.
Yay, our buttercream! Our pastry cream, whatever it's called. So we're gonna get our pastry cream onto the electric mix, and we're just gonna start mixing it up until all the clumps are gone. All right, so once it gets to kind of this consistency, kind of pretty smooth, we're gonna start adding in our softened butter. So as you can see, it's gonna start looking kind of like cottage cheese, like kind of like curdled milk or something. But that's normal. You just gotta let it keep whipping, doing its thing. It kind of goes for a while. Ooh, looks really good to me. Perfect. All right, now that our buttercream is all finished, I'm gonna pop these bad boys into the oven. On top of that tray that I already put in there. So there we go. And we're gonna let those babies just rest in there for about 15 minutes, then we're gonna check on them, and it'll take about 15 to 20 minutes for them to cook. All right, my macarons are out of the oven and they look beautiful. So I'm just gonna let them sit for 30 minutes, let them rest, cool down, and then we can pipe them. After they've rested for a little bit, you can sort of just start unpeeling them and kind of matching them up to ones that correspond size-wise, red shut up. And then you can just go ahead and pipe your filling. I'm doing that, and voila, frick. Voila, there you have it, macarons.